You keep telling yourself you're lazy, that there's something broken inside you, something weak, undisciplined, and maybe even beyond fixing. Every day you wake up with the quiet intention to change, to do more, to be more. But by nightfall, all you're left with is the same crushing disappointment and a voice in your head that says, "You failed again." But what if the problem isn't laziness? What if what you call laziness is actually a defense mechanism, the mind's way of protecting you from something it hasn't processed, something it never healed from? You weren't born this way. There was a version of you that tried, that cared deeply, that showed up even when it hurt. So ask yourself, when did you stop? Because sometimes it's not that we've given up, it's that we've been wounded for so long, we forgot what it feels like to move freely. You've said it quietly, maybe too many times to count, "I'm just lazy." It slips in after a missed deadline, an untouched to-do list, or hours lost in endless scrolling. You weren't moving, not because you didn't care, but because something inside had already whispered, "What's the point?" So you called it laziness. It was easier that way. A quick label for something much heavier. A shortcut explanation for the discomfort, the guilt, the stuckness. But behind that word, something subtle and dangerous happened. You stopped asking why. You stopped looking underneath the behavior and started believing a lie. This is just who I am. But what if it's not? What if what we call laziness is often the voice of a nervous system in survival mode, a mind that's burned out, a heart too scared to try again, not a flaw in character, but a signal of emotional overload? Because the truth is, most people who call themselves lazy are not resting in comfort. They're weighed down by pain that comes from failure, from shame, from years of trying and being told it still wasn't enough. No one chooses to feel numb. No one wants to give up. That kind of inertia doesn't arrive overnight. It grows quietly, like fog creeping in until everything feels heavy. And by the time it wraps around you, you've already internalized the story. I'm the problem. I'm lazy. I'm broken. We grow up in systems that reward productivity and punish stillness, that praise effort but ignore struggle. If you failed a test, it wasn't because you were anxious or overwhelmed. It was because you didn't try hard enough. If you burned out halfway, it wasn't exhaustion. It was labeled weakness. And so the story grew. But neuroscience tells us something different. When the brain perceives threat, even emotional ones, it shuts down higher functions like focus, motivation, and creativity. It doesn't care about success. It cares about safety. And in that moment, action feels dangerous. Not because we're lazy, but because we're afraid. Afraid of failing again. Afraid of being seen trying, only to fall short. Afraid that if we do give our best, and it's still not enough, we'll have nothing left to hide behind. So we freeze. We procrastinate. We numb ourselves with distractions. Not because we're defiant, but because we're protecting a fragile part of us that's still healing. Here's what no one tells you. Calling yourself lazy doesn't fix the problem. Shame doesn't create motivation. It deepens the wound. Every time you say, "I'm just lazy," you reinforce the wrong story and bury the real one. Instead, try asking, what am I afraid of? What haven't I processed? What part of me is still hurting? Laziness isn't the opposite of productivity. It's often a message. This is too much right now. I'm not ready. I want to move, but I don't feel safe. And when you finally stop calling it laziness and start calling it what it is, pain, fear, exhaustion, that's when healing begins.
So next time you find yourself frozen in front of a screen, a pile of laundry, or a blank page, pause. Before shame rushes in, remember, this isn't about effort. It's about survival. And wounds don't heal through judgment. They heal when they're understood. In the next section, we'll explore exactly how your brain protects you through avoidance and why understanding that is the first step toward breaking free. If you've ever called yourself lazy, maybe it's time to pause. Because what you're facing might not be laziness at all. It might be avoidance. And that changes everything. Avoidance isn't a flaw in character. It's a survival response, a reflex wired into your nervous system after too many moments where action led to pain, failure, or judgment. You sit down to begin, to write, to clean, to speak up, and your chest tightens, not from disinterest, but from fear. Fear that's been carried quietly, for years. This is the part no one sees. Avoidance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it tiptoes in as hesitation, as just 5 more minutes of scrolling, as endless planning, as telling yourself, I'm just not ready yet. But behind the delay is almost always something deeper. Fear of being judged, of not being good enough, or of confirming the belief that you are the failure. Not that you might fail, but that you are the failure. This kind of fear doesn't start from nowhere. Maybe you grew up in a space where effort was invisible, where mistakes were punished, not understood, where perfection was the standard and vulnerability was unsafe. So your body learned, don't try too hard, don't be seen, don't start, it's safer that way. And even now, long after the original danger is gone, your nervous system still remembers. That's why opening an email can feel terrifying, why speaking up makes your throat close, why your mind shuts down before you begin. It's not laziness. It's your body trying to protect you from a threat it still thinks is real. Avoidance wears many masks. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism, waiting for the right mindset, the ideal plan, the perfect moment. But really, it's fear. The fear that anything less than flawless will expose something unworthy in you. Other times, it's shutdown, a total freeze. No thoughts, no plans, just a wave of heaviness before you even begin. Then there's the deepest layer, shame. This isn't about what you do, it's about who you believe you are. It's not, I might fail, it's, I am the failure. And from that place, every task becomes dangerous. Every goal becomes proof waiting to break you again. But here's the truth. Avoidance doesn't mean you're broken. It means your body still remembers what hurt used to feel like. And it's doing its best to keep you safe. Real change doesn't come from forcing yourself forward. It comes from noticing. Noticing when your body tightens, when I can't shows up before anything even starts. And instead of shame, you ask, what part of me feels unsafe right now? What fear lives beneath this task? What would it look like to move with care, not pressure? That's not softness. That's science. Your brain won't think clearly when your emotional system is in distress. Until your body feels safe, your mind won't follow. So no, you can't shame yourself into action, but you can soothe yourself into readiness. Healing avoidance isn't glamorous. It's brushing your teeth even when you feel numb. It's sending 1 email instead of 20. It's choosing one small act, even with fear still present. And slowly, your nervous system learns. Action doesn't always lead to pain. Being seen doesn't always mean being judged. Effort doesn't always end in failure. That's when momentum returns, not from force, but from safety. Because the part of you that avoids, it's not the enemy. It's the part that tried to protect you when no one else did. And now, you have the chance to show it something new. That moving forward can be safe. That trying again doesn't have to hurt. That you're not here to punish yourself. You're here to understand yourself. And that is where things begin to change. Avoidance doesn't just appear. It's not a glitch in your motivation. It's a scar. Quiet, layered, left behind by years of trying and being hurt. Most of us think burnout or paralysis happens all at once, like a system crash. But it doesn't. It builds slowly, like rust. One harsh comment, one moment of being overlooked, a childhood full of pressure, an environment where love had to be earned, not given, where your worth was always tied to output, never just your being. That kind of environment doesn't just affect how you act. It rewires how you see yourself. Because the task you're avoiding today, the blank page, the unopened message, the unmade call, it's not about that task. It's about what it represents. Fear of failure, fear of being seen and found lacking, fear that you'll try and confirm the one belief you've carried for too long. I'm not enough. Somewhere along the line, you learn that your value was conditional on grades, results, strength, silence. So when you're not doing, not winning, not progressing, you feel worthless. Not because you are, but because someone, somewhere taught you to feel that way. Maybe it was a parent who only smiled when you succeeded. Maybe you were the strong one in the family, the fixer, the emotional anchor. Maybe it was survival, in a home, a culture, or a system that left no space for rest. These patterns became your beliefs. If I stop, I'll fall behind. If I'm not excellent, I'm nothing. If I show weakness, I won't be loved. So you pushed, and pushed, until your body couldn't anymore. But you didn't collapse in chaos. You collapsed in silence. Endless scrolling, oversleeping, undereating. You said, I don't care. But truthfully, you cared too much to risk being hurt again. This isn't apathy, it's grief. Grief for all the times you tried and it still wasn't enough. Grief for the childhood you needed but didn't get. Grief for the adult you've become, tired, disconnected, unsure how to fix what you don't even remember breaking. And grief, when unprocessed, turns into numbness. That numbness? It's not laziness, it's protection. Because when effort always equals pain, your nervous system shuts down to survive. So, no, you're not stuck because you don't care. You're stuck because caring has become too painful. But the real damage doesn't come from the inaction. It comes from the story you tell yourself about it. You start thinking, maybe I'm just like this. Everyone else is managing, so what's wrong with me? And slowly, a coping mechanism becomes an identity. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. You stop seeing avoidance as a wound. You start calling it your personality. But here's what no one told you. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are a human being who's been carrying invisible weight for so long, you forgot what it felt like to move freely. But somewhere beneath that exhaustion is still you. The root of your paralysis isn't a lack of discipline. It's the loneliness of trying without support. It's the silence you've had to survive in. It's the kindness you were never given. What you need isn't more willpower. It's being seen. It's someone saying, I get it. You're not weak. You're healing. You're not failing. You've just been surviving the best you can. Because the moment you stop seeing your patterns as flaws and start seeing them as survival strategies, That's when everything shifts, not through force, but through compassion. Healing begins not when you push harder, but when you stop fighting yourself. When you realize that the procrastination you've shamed was just your nervous system begging, "Please, not again." And when you can finally hear that plea with empathy, not judgment, you begin to move forward. Not because you have to, but because for the first time, you feel safe enough to try. We ended the last part with a quiet truth. Your hesitation isn't failure, it's protection. But what happens when protection becomes a prison? When survival mode becomes your default? This is where we meet something deeper. Learned helplessness. Not a weakness, not laziness, but the result of repeatedly learning through experience that your effort doesn't matter. It often starts quietly. You try, you speak up, you care, but you're met with silence, criticism, indifference, maybe not in one big moment, but in dozens of small ones that whisper, "You don't matter," or worse, "Nothing you do will ever be enough." So eventually you stop trying, not because you gave up, but because trying started to hurt more than doing nothing. And that silence from others becomes silence inside you. You stop trusting your instincts. You start mistaking numbness for peace. You say, "I'm just tired," when really you're grieving. Because that's what this is, grief. Grief for all the energy you gave with nothing in return. Grief for the child who was never heard. Grief for the adult who still feels invisible. Learned helplessness doesn't look dramatic. It looks like scrolling for hours even when you hate yourself for it. It looks like staring at your to-do list, unable to begin. It looks like waking up already exhausted before the day has even started. And then shame creeps in. Not just about what you're not doing, but about who you think you are. That voice gets louder. You never finish anything. You'll never change. This is just who you are now. But that's not the truth. That's not who you are. It's who you became in response to pain no one helped you carry. What we often call lack of motivation is really accumulated evidence. Evidence that effort didn't lead to safety, that trying didn't lead to love, that showing up didn't matter. But here's the key. What was learned can be unlearned. Unlearning helplessness doesn't start with logic. It starts with noticing. Because it's not just your mind saying this won't work. It's your body remembering every time it didn't. So when you freeze in front of a screen, when you put off that message, when you avoid the thing you know matters, it's not laziness. It's your nervous system bracing for another disappointment. The irony is heartbreaking. In trying to protect you from more pain, your system shuts you off from growth. It trades risk for stillness, joy for numbness, life for safety. But here's what matters most. You weren't meant to stay here. This was survival, not your destination. You adapted, and you adapted well. But now, it's time to learn a different way to live. It doesn't start with discipline. It starts with softness, with noticing the voice that says, "Why bother?" and gently asking, "Who told me effort didn't matter? Who made me feel unsafe just for trying?" And then, little by little, you rebel. Not with force, but with tiny acts of healing. Brushing your teeth, even if you go nowhere. Replying to one message, not all. Going outside not because you should, but because you can. These small actions tell your body a new story. That action can be safe. That effort can be met with something other than pain. That you're not just surviving, you're relearning how to live. Because the truth is, you were never broken. You were just tired. Tired of trying alone. Tired of not being seen. But now you see it. You see that what you called laziness was protection. That what you labeled failure was a cry for rest. And that means healing is not just possible, it's already beginning. Healing doesn't begin with doing, it begins with understanding. Understanding where your patterns came from, why you freeze, why you avoid, why even small tasks feel overwhelming sometimes. It's not about fixing yourself, it's about finally listening to the parts of you that never had a voice. Because healing isn't a lightning bolt, it's a pause, a quiet moment where you stop blaming yourself for being stuck and start asking, why did I have to protect myself in the first place? We were sold healing like a product, step-by-step guides, perfect routines, morning rituals, as if wholeness could be scheduled. But the healing that truly transforms you is not aesthetic. It's not about habit trackers or productivity hacks. It's about compassion. Because what you understand, you can begin to forgive. And what you forgive, you can finally release. When you look at your exhaustion through the lens of shame, everything feels like failure. You become both the judge and the prisoner, punishing yourself for not showing up without ever asking if you were taught how. You demand fire from ashes. You expect strength from what's still healing. But the truth is, your bad habits, they were strategies. Distraction was a shield, silence was safety, emotional numbness was armor. You didn't fail, you adapted. Understanding doesn't excuse everything, but it gives you a map. And that map leads to self-compassion, the kind that says, you did what you had to do to survive, and now you're allowed to learn something new. Because healing doesn't come from self-disgust, it comes from care. Not from hating the version of you who coped, but from honoring the fact that you kept going. Healing means sitting with the parts of yourself you've avoided for years, not to fight them, not to fix them, but to listen. To the anxiety that once screamed, "No one is coming." To the guilt that formed every time you chose yourself. To the sadness that never had a witness. And when you truly listen, you begin to realize none of these parts are trying to destroy you. They're trying to protect you, the only way they knew how. But now it's time to outgrow survival. It also means telling yourself the truth. Not just about what happened, but about what it did to you. You may have been neglected and taught to call it independence. You may have been controlled and told it was love. You may have been overwhelmed and praised for being so strong. And over time, you began mistaking trauma for personality. You said, "I'm just bad with emotions," when what you meant was, "No one ever made space for mine." You said, "I procrastinate too much," when what you meant was, "I'm scared to disappoint anyone again." You said, "I'm unmotivated," but really your nervous system never felt safe enough to begin. The stories you told yourself weren't false. They were survival codes. But now it's time to write a new story. You are not a list of flaws. You are a person in progress. Not broken, but becoming. And part of that becoming means accepting that not every wound will get closure. Some apologies won't come. Some chapters won't be rewritten. But healing is not about rewriting the past. It's about expanding your capacity to meet the future differently. It doesn't look like perfection. It looks like presence. Crying for no reason. Feeling tired after setting a boundary. Asking for help and realizing that's strength, not weakness. Because the truth is, you don't need to be fixed to be worthy of rest. You don't need to earn peace. You don't have to be productive to be valuable. Healing is showing up honestly, even when all you can do is whisper, "I'm trying." And that's enough. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be whole, to gather the parts of you that were hidden, silenced, or shamed, and bring them back home. And yes, healing takes courage, to face grief, to let go of timelines that were never yours, to say, "I deserve more than survival." But the moment you say that, the moment you believe it, even for a second, that's where healing truly begins.
If this resonated with you, I want you to remember this. You are not behind. You are not broken. You're just healing, and healing isn't a race. It's a return, a slow, patient return to yourself. And if these words spoke to something deep in you, if they gave your pain a name or your silence a voice, then I hope you'll stay. This channel was made for people like you, the ones who've fallen and are still standing, the ones who feel lost but keep searching, the ones who are ready to heal, even if they don't know how yet. So if you want to walk this path with us, click subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. There's more to uncover, more to remember, more to rebuild. Because your story isn't finished yet, and you don't have to walk it alone.